My name is Olivia Bennett, and I'm 21 years old. 2 weeks ago, I stood behind the curtain of a university auditorium in Chicago, Illinois, listening to the roar of 4,500 people chanting someone else's name, my brother's name, while my parents sat in the front row smiling like they had finally achieved something worth showing off. They had no idea I was even on campus. They had no idea I had transferred in quietly 6 months earlier. And they definitely had no idea I would be the one delivering the valedictorian speech. But this story doesn't begin there. It begins 4 years earlier, in a suburban house in Naperville, Illinois, when my father looked at me like I was a mistake he didn't want to financially repeat, and said the sentence I still hear when everything gets too quiet. But before I go further, if you enjoy stories like this, subscribe, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. Now listen closely, because this is where everything started falling apart, and where I finally started building something they couldn't control. The acceptance letters arrived on a cold Monday morning in March. I still remember the sound of the mailbox opening. Sharp, metallic, final. My brother Andrew Bennett opened his first, Stanford University. Full acceptance. My mother screamed before he even finished reading it. My father nodded slowly, like it was confirmation of something he already believed about the world. Then I opened mine. University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign. Strong program, in-state tuition, safe choice. No one reacted. Not at first. Andrew was already calling relatives. My mother was crying and hugging him. My father was calculating numbers in his head like always. Then he turned to me, and the air in the room changed. "Olivia, we're not funding an out-of-state education for you." I blinked. "What?" He leaned back like he was discussing interest rates. "It's not a smart investment. Andrew is exceptional, top 1%. You're solid, but not rare." My mother still didn't look at me. Andrew didn't either. I actually laughed once, thinking it had to be a misunderstanding. No one corrected it. My father continued calmly. "You'll figure it out. Community, local university, scholarships if you're serious." That sentence didn't sound cruel to him. It sounded responsible, like budgeting. And that was the moment I understood something I would never forget. In my family, love was conditional on return, and I wasn't giving enough back. That night I didn't cry. I had done enough of that over the years. I just lay in bed staring at the ceiling, realizing something simple but permanent. They had already decided my future without me. Andrew was the success story. I was the practical option, the backup daughter. And this wasn't new. It never had been. When Andrew turned 16, he got a brand new Tesla Model 3. I got his old used Toyota. When Andrew took summer programs in California, my parents paid everything. When I asked for a writing workshop in New York, my father said, "Be realistic, Olivia." At family dinners, Andrew was asked about his ambitions. I was asked if I was managing okay. In photos, Andrew was always centered. I was always slightly off frame. Not excluded, just less important, like background detail. Like someone who could be cropped out later. One night, I found my mother's laptop open in the kitchen. I didn't mean to look, but I did. An email thread with my father. Subject, education budget prioritization. And there a breakdown. Stanford approved, my education limited. One line stood out. Olivia's trajectory does not justify high-cost investment. Trajectory. Like I was a path, not a person. I closed the laptop and went to my room without speaking. And that night I made a decision. Not to fight them, but to outgrow them. I started applying for scholarships the next morning. Everything I could find, merit-based, need-based, leadership awards, writing competitions. I stopped thinking of it as opportunity. I started thinking of it as survival, because it was. I worked after school at a bookstore in downtown Naperville, then came home and studied until 2 or 3 a.m. Sleep became optional. Food became secondary. My schedule became simple. Work, study, apply, repeat. Andrew was preparing for Stanford with private tutors and networking events. I was preparing to leave their system entirely. Then I found it. The Whitfield Foundation Scholarship, full tuition, $10,000 annual stipend, only 20 students selected nationwide. I remember staring at it longer than I should have, not because it was hopeful, because it was absurd. But I bookmarked it anyway, because for the first time, I didn't have a better option. At 1:58 a.m., Whitfield didn't feel like hope at first. It felt like pressure, like something fragile I was already expected to drop. The application process wasn't just difficult, it was invasive. Essays about leadership, identity, financial hardship, interviews that felt less like conversations and more like being quietly evaluated for every decision I'd ever made. And through all of it, I didn't tell my family. Not because I was hiding something impressive, but because I didn't want their opinions contaminating something I hadn't earned yet. Dr. Moore became the only person who actually saw what I was doing. One afternoon after class, she handed me back a draft essay. Red ink everywhere. But at the bottom, one sentence. This is good, but you're still writing like someone who's asking for permission to exist. I looked up at her. I don't know how not to. She nodded like she expected that answer. Then learn. That was it. No comfort, no praise. Just direction. And for some reason, that mattered more. My life became a loop. Work, study, write, rewrite, sleep for 4 hours. Repeat. The cafe shift started at 5:30 a.m. I memorized customers' orders before they spoke. I smiled when I was exhausted. I stopped checking mirrors because I didn't recognize the version of me looking back. At school, I was invisible. At work, I was functional. At home, I was absent even when I was physically there. Andrew was at Stanford living what my parents called his trajectory. I was building something they didn't even have a word for yet. Then came winter break. The first one I didn't go home for. Not because I couldn't afford it, but because I realized I didn't want to sit at a table where I was only tolerated in small doses. My mother called anyway. Are you coming home? No, I said. A pause. Your father thinks you're distancing yourself. I almost laughed. I think I've just stopped performing. Silence. Then she said something softer. Olivia, we're still your family. I stared at the wall of my basement room. I know, I said, but I didn't say I feel like it, because that wasn't true. Not yet. That winter, something shifted. I stopped writing essays trying to sound impressive and started writing the truth, about exhaustion, about being measured differently, about what it feels like to be loved conditionally. Dr. Moore read one of them and didn't speak for a long time. Then she said, "This is the first time I've read you on the page." I didn't know what that meant until later. The Whitfield interview came in early spring. New York City. 3 days. Final round. 50 candidates. 20 scholarships. When I saw the email, my hands went because this was the point where effort stopped being enough. Now it was comparison. And I had spent my entire life being the less than version of someone else. I checked my bank account. $612. A bus ticket was $58. A flight was impossible. I stared at the screen for a long time. Then I called the only person I trusted, Dr. Moore. I need advice, I said. You already know what I'm going to say, she replied. I can't afford. You're not asking for permission, she interrupted. You're deciding whether you're going or not. Silence. Then she added, if you don't show up, someone else will take your place without hesitation. That was enough. I bought the bus ticket. The night before leaving, I packed everything I owned into a single backpack. 2 outfits, 1 notebook, 1 printed essay draft. That was it. My entire life reduced to what could fit on my shoulders. I looked around my basement room one last time. No decorations, no memories worth keeping, just survival and ambition. The bus ride to New York took 11 hours. I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw alternate versions of myself. The one who stayed home, the one who quit, the one who was still trying to earn approval from people who never planned to give it. By the time we arrived, my neck hurt and my hands were shaking. But I was there. That was enough. The Whitfield building was glass and steel. Everything inside looked like certainty. Everyone inside looked like they belonged. Designer coats, confident voices, parents standing nearby like silent sponsors. I looked at my thrift store blazer and felt for a moment like I had already lost. Then I remembered Dr. Moore's words, "You're not asking for permission." So I stopped asking. The interview panels were brutal. Questions about leadership under pressure, ethical decisions, failure, success. Every answer felt like a test I couldn't prepare for. But something strange happened halfway through. I stopped trying to impress them and started answering honestly. About working multiple jobs, about being the second choice in my own family, about learning how to function without being seen. When I finished speaking, one of the panelists leaned back and said, "You've been carrying more than most people your age even understand." I didn't know how to respond, so I didn't. Back in Naperville, I didn't tell my family I'd gone to New York. They found out through Andrew. Of course they did. He called me that night. "You went to Whitfield?" "Yes." "You didn't say anything." "I didn't need permission." A pause. "You think you're actually gonna get it?" "I think I already decided I'm not waiting for anyone to validate me anymore." He didn't like that. He hung up shortly after. Waiting for the decision was worse than the interview, because now everything was suspended. No progress, no certainty, just time. I worked, studied, pretended not to check my email every 10 minutes. And slowly, I started to understand something important. Even if I didn't get it, I had already changed. Then the email arrived. Tuesday morning, 7:14 a.m. Subject, Whitfield Foundation decision. I opened it while standing in the kitchen of the cafe before my shift. My hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped my phone. "Dear Miss Bennett," I stopped breathing. "We are pleased to inform you." Everything went silent. "You have been selected as a Whitfield Scholar." I read it 3 times. Then I sat down on the floor behind the counter and cried so hard I couldn't hear anything else. Not because I won, but because for the first time I had been chosen as myself. Not as someone's comparison, not as someone's lesser version. Me. That evening I called Dr. Moore. She answered immediately. "I saw it," she said before I could speak. "I don't know what to say." "You don't need to." A pause. Then she added, "This is where your life starts changing faster than your family can understand." I didn't know how right she was. 2 days later, I got another email. Whitfield transfer opportunity. One of their partner universities was Northbridge University, Chicago. My stomach dropped, because Andrew's world was now my option. And I hadn't decided yet if that was coincidence or something far more complicated. Northbridge University in Chicago didn't feel real the first week. It felt like a different version of the world I had only seen through screens and Andrew's photos. Stone buildings, quiet confidence, people who walked like they belonged there without having to prove it first. And me, still adjusting, still carrying the version of myself that used to calculate survival in hours of sleep and dollars per shift. Whitfield covered tuition, a stipend covered rent. But nothing covered the feeling of being a guest in a life I was technically qualified to live. The hardest part wasn't academics. It was identity. At Northbridge, no one knew I was the girl who worked 3 jobs. No one knew I used to eat instant noodles for dinner while rewriting essays at 2 a.m. Here, I was just Olivia Bennett. And strangely, that was more disorienting than being underestimated. Because when no one expects you to fail, you start wondering who you are without the struggle. Then I saw him, Andrew Bennett, standing outside the economics building. Same posture, same confidence, different world. He hadn't seen me yet. For a moment, I considered walking away. But I didn't, Andrew. He turned. And for the first time in years, he didn't immediately recognize me as his sister in a smaller life. He just looked confused. Then his expression shifted. "Oh, Olivia." Like he was recalibrating where I fit in reality. "You go here?" "Yes," a pause. "How?" I almost laughed. "Same way you did. I got here." He didn't like that answer. Because it removed the hierarchy. That night, I didn't sleep. Not because I was upset, but because something fundamental had shifted. For years, Andrew had been the reference point, the standard, the successful one. Now we were in the same place, and I was no longer behind him. Whitfield required a capstone project. Mine focused on educational inequality and access bias in elite admissions systems. Dr. Moore, who now visited Chicago occasionally, read my proposal and said, "This is the first time I've seen you aim at the system instead of surviving it." I nodded. I think I'm done surviving. The call from my parents came 3 weeks later. Mom first, then Dad, then Andrew, then silence, then Mom again. Finally, I answered, "Olivia, why didn't you tell us you transferred?" Her voice was careful, like she was walking on glass. "You didn't ask," I said. "That's not fair." I paused. "You stopped asking a long time ago." Silence. Then my father. "We want to understand this scholarship situation. It's already done. And the school? Northbridge." Another silence. Then slower. "That's Andrews University." Yeah, that was the moment everything tightened. Not anger, not confusion, recognition. 2 weeks later, they visited Chicago, all 3 of them. Like a family trying to catch up to a version of reality they had missed too many chapters of. We met at a cafe near campus. Neutral ground. Andrew sat across from me like he was still trying to calculate how this version of me existed. My mother looked tired. My father looked uncertain. That was new. "We didn't realize how serious the scholarship was," my mother said softly. "It's real," I replied. Dad leaned forward. "You've done well. We're proud of you." I looked at him, and for the first time I didn't feel anything when I heard it. Not warmth, not pain, just distance. "Pride is easier when you didn't participate," I said calmly. Andrew shifted in his seat. "That's not fair," he said quietly. I turned to him. "You got support without asking." I stopped asking and kept going. Silence again, this time longer. He looked down, and for the first time, I think he understood the gap wasn't intelligence, it was access. Graduation came faster than I expected. Whitfield scholars had a separate ceremony, but I was also chosen as valedictorian of Northbridge's honors cohort. That meant one thing. I would give the main commencement speech. And my family would be there. All of them. They just didn't know what I would say yet. The morning of graduation was bright and sharp. The kind of Chicago spring day that feels too clean for emotional honesty. The auditorium filled with 4,000 people. Families. Faculty. Students pretending not to be nervous. I stood backstage, holding the speech in my hand. But I didn't need it anymore, because I already knew what I was going to say. I saw them before I went on stage. Front row, center section. My parents, Andrew. My mother was holding a bouquet. My father was holding a camera. Andrew was sitting slightly forward like he expected something to surprise him. They were smiling. They were prepared for a proud moment. They just didn't know whose. The announcer stepped forward. "And now, please welcome this year's valedictorian and Whitfield scholar." My name echoed through the hall. "Olivia Bennett." I stood and walked, slowly, not rushing, not hiding, just moving forward. When I reached the podium, I looked out, thousands of faces, and one row I recognized too well. My father lowered the camera slightly. My mother stopped smiling. Andrew leaned forward, confused. Then recognition started to hit them. Not all at once, but in waves. Slow, unavoidable. I spoke. "My name is Olivia Bennett." Pause. "And 4 years ago I was told I was not worth the investment." I saw my mother's hand freeze midair. My father stopped breathing for a second. Andrew turned fully toward the stage. I was told to stay realistic. I was told to accept less. I was told that someone else in my family was the priority. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. The microphone carried everything. I didn't come here to prove anyone wrong. I came here because I stopped waiting to be proven right. Silence in the room. Complete silence. I worked 3 jobs. I slept 4 hours a night. I applied to scholarships no one thought I would get. I built a life that didn't require permission. I paused and looked directly at them. Not angrily, just clearly. And I want to say something important. You were not wrong that you made an investment decision. A breath in the audience. But you were wrong about the asset. Silence broke into tension. I was never a bad investment. I was just an unrecognized one. My mother was crying now. Quietly, my father's hand lowered completely. Andrew looked like he didn't know where to put his expression. I am not here because I was chosen over someone else. I am here because I chose myself when no one else did. I took a breath. Final lines. And if there is anything I want you to take from my story, it is this. Being overlooked does not mean being lesser. It means being unseen. And unseen things still grow. I stepped back. Applause didn't start immediately. It built. Slow, then overwhelming. People stood, one by one, until the entire auditorium was on its feet. But I didn't look at the crowd. I looked once at my family. Not for validation. Not for revenge. Just acknowledgement. And then I walked off stage. Backstage, Dr. Moore was waiting. She didn't say anything at first. Then she simply said, "You didn't burn anything down." I nodded. "No. You built something stronger." "Yes." At the reception, my parents approached. This time, slowly, carefully, like they were afraid I might disappear again. My mother spoke first. "We didn't see it." "I know." My father exhaled. "We were wrong." "I know that too." Andrew stepped forward. "I think I finally understand." I looked at him. "And?" "I think I've been living in a version of success that didn't include noticing people like you." That was honest. Not perfect, but honest. And that mattered more. Months later, I moved into my first real apartment in Chicago. Not survival, not temporary, just life. Dr. Moore visited once, looked around, and said, "This is what independence looks like when it finally stops being a reaction." I smiled. I think I'm done reacting. I still talk to my family. Not the way they used to expect, but on new terms. Uneven. Careful. Real. We are not what we were, and we're not what we will be, but we are something. And if you ask me what changed the most, it wasn't the scholarship, it wasn't the speech, it wasn't even leaving home, it was this. I stopped waiting for people to notice my worth and started acting like it already existed. Because it did. Always had.